In southeastern Madagascar near Fort Dauphin, a program for the protection of lemurs has been set up by QMM, ANGAP, and the Madagascan Waters and Forestry Board. Its goal is to save groups of lemurs from a sure death as a result of constant deforestation in this seaside area. Roger and Gilson are faced with this emergency. Roger and Gilson belong to the Antanush ethnic group. They work for Kit Mineral Madagascar, QMM, the mining company which is financing the program. Today, the two men are going to set traps in the devastated forest areas to capture the Chirogalius medius, one of the two lemur species they have to protect. They set the traps at sunset, since these small lemurs are nocturnal. During the day, the animals sleep in tree hollows. The traps are closed, since they will be picked up in the early morning, and the sun could blind these small lemurs who have very fragile pupils. The region of Nahompoha is especially concerned with this protection program since it is near the Mandena area, the site selected by QMM for the establishment of a 250-hectare reserve. This is the Antanush region, an ethnic group in southern Madagascar. The women are responsible for its main economic activity. In swampy areas on the edge of the forest, they gather reeds, which are then woven together. The women's handicraft work is highly reputed in Madagascar. Blondine is Roger's wife. She's proud that her husband works at the reserve. The region has no resources, and the people are extremely poor. For the Antanush people, the reserve represents a hope. The decision, however, to transform part of their region into a protected zone is a controversial subject for the Antanush, since they no longer have the right to hunt for lemurs, nor eat this very popular delicacy. February is ideal for capturing the Chirogalius. The small lemurs will be transported to the zone of Mandena. At this time of year, they have to store reserves of food before their long hibernation, which will soon begin. The Chirogalius medius is the only species of lemur to enter this lethargic state, which lasts from March through September. The Voyager's tree is the symbol of this relocation program. Jean-Baptiste and Riva are in charge of the Mandena Reserve Research Center. They've been notified that a group of Chirogalius has been spotted by a villager who was about to chop down a tree. Roger is told exactly where they are. His job is to capture them so that they can be brought to the reserve. Roger, however, doesn't need a map. He knows every inch of land and every tree. What threatens the life of the forest most here is the scorched earth system. In order to clear 50 hectares of land suitable for cultivation, the Antinouche set fire to small plots of forest land. But the flames spread as a result of the violent winds in the region and can destroy as many as 400 hectares. Once this zone was covered with lush vegetation, but there's almost none left, and the remaining pockets are condemned to the same fate. In the short term, they'll disappear, and with them, an exceptional, often endemic flora and fauna. After a 2-hour hike, the two men reached the spot indicated by the villagers. Roger is careful since, in spite of their small size, the Chirogalius have very sharp teeth. The Chirogalius are fairly solitary lemurs. They often live completely alone or in very small groups. The infants are born in January after a 60-day gestation period. The females give birth only once a year and have 1 to 4 babies. The two men were very lucky, since there were 7 individuals in this hole, including 2 two-month-old babies. Since they're very fragile, Roger separates them from the others so that they are not crushed during the transport. Gilson makes sure to cover the cage to protect them from the light. All the two men can do every day is to bear witness to the increased deforestation. Madagascans seem either indifferent or unaware of the disaster. They destroy an entire tree for a handful of wood chips, sometimes without even chopping the tree down. They let it die erect. For the Antinouche, the forest always seemed gigantic and infinite, but in 2,000 years of human occupation, more than 3/4 of Madagascar's forests have been destroyed. Here at the QMM Research Center, work is carried out dealing with the protection and reintroduction of different species of vegetation. In the laboratory, Jean-Baptiste checks the health of the newcomers so as to identify them and initiate them into the follow-up program. The Chirogalius medius is one of the smallest known species of lemur. Its body and head measure no more than 20 centimeters. The youngsters, like this one, are dependent on their mothers for 3 to 4 months until hibernation begins. As adults, these lemurs will weigh about 160 grams, but their weight will actually vary from 140 to 220 grams, depending on the time of year. During the rainy season, the Chirogalius can store up to 75 grams of fat reserves in preparation for hibernation. This fat is stored in their tails, which can measure up to 20 centimeters, corresponding to a 40% weight increase. Compared to other primates, lemurs are considered to be more primitive. Their skulls are less solid, their brains smaller, their vision laterally oriented. Their sense of smell, however, is very highly developed. Jean-Baptiste makes sure to sterilize his instruments before removing a part of the skin on the ear for analysis. This special hypodermic needle is used to implant a microchip on the animal so that it can be identified with the help of a scanner. In the coming years, the team will follow the animal to determine the steps of its growth and the state of its health. The program and the equipment are financed by QMM, Kit Mineral Madagascar, a Quebec and Madagascan mining company which hopes to obtain the drilling rights for titanium in the region in exchange for investing in the protection of endangered flora and fauna. Like all Antanouche families, Rogers does basket work. The women make baskets, matting, or hats, which a collector comes to the village to buy once or twice a year. He in turn sells them to all the markets on the island. To make the reeds less brittle and easier to weave, they are rolled in kaolin, which also makes them more solid. By involving this ethnic group in the Forest and Lemur Protection Program, QMM and ANGAP are trying to make the Antanouche sensitive to the problems of biodiversity. Roger and Gilles will free the Chirogalius in the protected part of the reserve, to which the animals will have to get accustomed. This zone has been naturally preserved by swamp, making it difficult to reach and unusable for agriculture. The lemurs will be safe here, as they were when they first came to Madagascar 35 million years ago. They must have crossed the oceans, very shallow at the time, on natural rafts and invaded the island, which was covered with forest. Since there were no predators on the island, the lemurs grew in number and different species developed. There are 54 in Madagascar, representing 90% of known lemur species throughout the world.
Itu? Hah? Ah, cium dapat. Hah? Shui.
Roger had already chosen this tree to house this large family. The Chirogalius can hibernate here in total safety.
Ayah benar-benar. Ayah benar-benar. Ikan ini. Ano kung naniskan yun siya? Adios ka na ni dito. Itilizin lang bang dito?
The two guardians are going to spend the night in the reserve. They like this simple, natural life, but they're especially proud of their new responsibilities. Roger used to be a watchman. He worked in the city at Fort Dauphin and was stuck indoors all day. He was hired here several years ago when the program was set up. A year ago, he was asked if he could look after and train Jilsan. The two men are now very close. They're preparing their equipment, frontal flashlights and a radio tracker. Tomorrow they'll go after another species, the Fulvis colaris lemur, one of the rarest species on the island. They can only be found in southern Madagascar, and Roger has already saved one group of them a year ago by transferring them to the Mandena Reserve. Ever since, the two men have been following them, watching their little protégés' readaptation. Tonight they're going to see the Chirogalius medius released here a few months ago. Although when he was young, Roger liked to hunt lemurs, it would never occur to him to do so today. Small lemurs are usually very wild, but these are used to man's presence. The Chirogalius, very active at night, feed on fruit, which are very abundant this time of year.
Oh, aku dah benar itu. Selamat bro. Selamat bro. Dari tu melihat tu benar. Iya, mesti bibi dulu terus neta dua tu. Ai kurva. Oh, fihum beba aku rengahan dah.
This reserve, dedicated to the protection of flora and fauna, created about 10 years ago, is still not open to the public. It's an experimental zone reserved for scientists. Roger and Jill's son also have to be game wardens. As they inspect the area, they go after potential poachers. The lemur relocation program began a year ago with the Fulvus colaris lemur. At that time, Roger and the QMM team saved about 15, which they captured in a commercialized part of the forest and then transferred to the reserve. Two Fulvus colaris lemurs are equipped with radio transmitter collars. Without radio tracking, it would be impossible to locate the group. It's vital for lemurs to become acclimatized, since it's their sole chance of surviving in the southeast of the island. They've suffered a great deal at the hands of man. Their flesh and their fur are both considered valuable. The Fulvus colaris lemur is medium-sized. It can measure up to 1 meter and weigh about 2.5 kilograms. It eats fruit, young shoots, and can live up to 25 years. They live in permanent groups of 3 to 12 individuals. Of the 15 relocated last year, only 3 left the reserve to go back to the area where they had been captured. The others seem to have adapted quite well. Today, lemurs are more threatened by the disappearance of the forest than by hunters. They're a symbol of the island's fragility. The creation of reserves managed by local natives is the last chance for the lemurs of Madagascar.